Hello, so welcome to the next in our Developing Faith with Hebrews. And today we are on to Hebrews chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. So let's have a read of these 6 verses together. Therefore, holy brothers and sisters who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. Jesus has been found worthy of greater honour than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honour than the house itself. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's house, bearing witness to what would be spoken by God in the future. But Christ is faithful as the Son over God's house. And we are his house, if indeed we hold firmly to our confidence and the hope in which we glory. So we've gone through the first 2 chapters of Hebrews. And in those 2 chapters, we've really got this understanding of things that the second generation believers were struggling with. They were having trouble to understand where Jesus came in the hierarchy with angels. And here we now move on to this 3rd chapter, and we start to see yet another thing that these second generation believers are having trouble with, which is understanding the hierarchy of Jesus and Moses. So starting to get a real understanding here, aren't we, on some of the issues, some of the things that these believers were really grappling with and really struggling with on understanding. And so the author's trying to show them where Jesus comes again in another issue, in another area that they're struggling in. So if we just have a little think again on who these people were, that this was primarily, back in when this was written, who it was primarily aimed at. And it was these second generation believers, as we've already said, and as you've probably heard us talk a bit on over these last few weeks. But remember, they had converted from Judaism, and their faith would have been back when they were Jews, and understanding that Moses was such an incredible guy. He was a real forefather of their faith, someone to be revered, someone to be looked up to, someone to be seen as a great role model in how to live by faith, in what to do. Dare I say it, for them would have been as close to God as you would get in a human, would have been their understanding. And then Jesus comes. And so they're still trying to understand, hang on, okay, I'm believing in Jesus, I've become a Christian, but where does he fit into what I already know, of the scriptures? Where does Jesus come into this? And what the author is really trying to say is, right, we've covered angels, we're now going to move on to another biggie, which is Moses, this forefather of the faith. And we're going to help you understand and see that actually Jesus is greater, is bigger than Moses, because of who he is, because of who his identity is, and to really help them, help us as well, to see the power in who Jesus is and why he came. So first of all, after kind of the author starts this 3rd chapter, he says, therefore, so we've got to understand and read this in the context of the last 2 chapters, where he's unpacked who Jesus is, why he came, the fact that we are brothers and sisters in Christ, that we are heirs because of who he is and what he did by dying on the cross for us. And we live under that truth as well. So therefore, because of everything I've said in those last 2 chapters, the author's saying, you need to fix your thoughts on Jesus. Now, we could end right there, because what a challenge, what a great thing is that for us to grab a hold of, to fix our thoughts, fix our eyes, fix everything that we are about onto Jesus. Wow. We can think on Jesus, we can pray to him, we can look to him, and he will be faithful to us. How awesome is that? And let's remember, when we use that word faithful, when we're talking about Jesus, is that it's not faithful in an earthly sense that will mean, yes, he's faithful 90% of the time, but there's those odd occasions where he doesn't show up. There's those odd occasions where he might let us down. There's those odd occasions where he won't be all that we need. No, that is not the Jesus faithful. Jesus' faithfulness means he will be forever faithful, and he will always be what we need and will give us all that we need. Now, obviously, our understanding of what we need may be slightly different to what we actually need, but let's not forget that Jesus will always be faithful to us. How do we know this? And the author goes on with this great explanation of how we can know this. That everything is built by God. In other words, everything comes from God. And what the author's trying to say here is, if the source of life, if the source of all that we know, if the creator of everything is God, and God sent his son, part of him, to be a faithful servant to us, for us, and a faithful servant over all that God has built, he will never let us down. He will never leave us. He will never be unfaithful. The architect wants what is best for his creation, wants what is best for all that he has made. And it's him that we are encouraged to think on, to fix our thoughts on, to fix our eyes onto. And the author helps us a bit more with this kind of example of a house being built. And yes, the house is great. The house is enjoyed. The house is wonderful. But actually, the builder of the house is even greater. The house wouldn't even be there if the builder hadn't created it. And the only way anything on this earth can be built is because of God. It's because of who he is, and it's because of all that he has created. Wow. Let's never forget that. All that we have, all that we are, is because of God, the creator. And we can look back at ourselves. We can look back and read the stories of Moses. And as much as these believers that this was originally written to would have just known these stories because they'd have been brought up with them, it was part of the Jewish faith that they had converted from. We can read those stories of Moses. We can look and see what a faithful man he was. We can look and see that he was a servant to God, that he tried to live his life by all that God asked of him. But what we need to understand and see, just as much as the believers then did, is that Jesus was also a faithful servant sent by God that did all that God had asked of him. And Jesus superseded Moses. Why? Because he was the Son of God. He was part God, part human in one being. He was the greatest servant, the most faithful servant, better than any man or woman on this earth, because he was also part God. Jesus' very identity means he is the greatest, means he came to earth so that he could look after, he could instruct, he could help, he could be involved with all that God had created. He could be, as the verses say, he could be over God's house. It's as if the architect is right here refining, rebuilding all of his original creation and making it to be all that the original creator designed it to be like and to be for. And then the author brings this image, this picture, into full view for us by placing us, you and me, right there in it, because he says we are the house. We are this amazing, this wonderful, this beautiful creation that God has made, God has designed, God has brought into being. Wow, how awesome is that? We are God's beautiful, wonderful creation that he wants to be involved with. We have a hope, we have a confidence in who God has made us to be, and we can join in with his glory because of who he is and because of Jesus, sent so that we could be made fully whole, made fully into relationship with our Creator God. There is no one else, there is nothing else that can make that be, that can make us feel whole, that can make us feel full, other than him, other than us surrendering to Jesus, accepting who he is, accepting that he made us and who he made us to be, and living our lives out in response to that. Do not think of yourself as anything other than a holy brother or sister once you've accepted Jesus, once you are into his family. You are his creation. You are loved by him, loved so much that he sent Jesus to help you, to help me, to make us whole, to make us all that he designed us to be. Jesus came as a servant and lived a faithful life to God, doing all that he asked of him. And he is still that servant. He is still being faithful. And he's doing that so that we can live a life that God has for each of us. These verses encourage us to hold on to that, to hold on to that truth, to have a confidence in that truth. And it's because of him that we have a hope, that we have a future, because of that incredible love that has been shown to us. I want to encourage us as we've looked at these verses today. Let us never take these truths for granted. Let us never become complacent about the truth we've just read here and shared together here. But let us live every day thankful that we are God's incredible creation and that all we have is because of him. God bless.